Marriage during a pandemic, blessings and challenges. I'm Presbytera Carrie Pappas from the Center for Family Care of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. We always want to thank Leadership 100 for their support for these webinars and for our ongoing ministries. I'd like to begin with a few housekeeping items. If you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you will see a box that says questions and answers. If you have any questions during this webinar, do not hesitate to type them in and we will get to as many as we are able to. We have about 45 minutes, but we are flexible if we go over and have a lot of questions. And finally, I just want to say about myself, I may be coughing some. I do not have COVID. I was recently tested, but my cough can be quite annoying to the people who are around me. Hopefully I won't have a fit during this next hour. Our presenters today are Tom and Presbytera Pat Tsagalakis. Father Tom serves as the pastor of Holy Apostles Church in Shoreline, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle. He's also a licensed marriage and family therapist and has a practice in Seattle. Presbytera Pat is the assistant director of the Family Wellness Ministry for the metropolis of San Francisco, which is producing some incredible resources right now. So if you're looking for any marriage and family resources, you can go to their website. She is also a music teacher, and music is her passion, and she is also a chanter. Presbytera and Father both serve as guest speakers and retreat leaders across the country. They have 2 adult children, one who lives in Salt Lake City, where my brother also lives, and their daughter who lives in Seattle. 2 things that are interesting facts about them. Father Tom is a beekeeper, and I've never talked to him about it, and I would love to know more about it someday.
Gosh,
And
I love it.
Presbytera Pat hails from Missoula, Montana, which most of us don't know anybody who hails from Missoula, Montana. Welcome, Father Tom and Pat. We're so grateful you're here to offer wisdom about marriage during this very, very difficult time. As I interact with people across the country, I'm hearing 3 recurring things about what's going on in people's marriages. Some people are experiencing some incredible, surprising blessings and even discoveries about one another during this time. Others are having struggles that they have never encountered before as they navigate stressors that are new to their marriage, possibly job losses, complicated debt, complicated grief because of death of a loved one that they have never were not able to visit while they were in the hospital. Both working from home with children in the house and being schooled. So there are a lot of challenges and stressors and strains on marriages right now. And finally, I'm hearing from other couples that there are underlying and unresolved issues of marriage and of our personal lives that are surfacing during these times and in some situations really bubbling over and creating some really difficult situations for marriages. Hopefully we can explore all these themes in our time together. So I'm going to begin with a personal question. What are some particular blessings the 2 of you in your stage of life as empty nesters have experienced during these last several weeks when things have been shut down and you're spending a whole lot more time together?
Well, thank you so much, Carrie, for having us. We're just thrilled to be here. Wow, this is a great question for us because we've been married now.
We're grateful that we like each other.
Yeah, we were real great. We really like each other. We're spending a lot of time together. We've been married 34 years, and we've never, in the history of our marriage, been able to spend this much time together. So we have found the time to be an incredible opportunity for a little bit better connection, a little bit more time together to take walks and to really have a lot of beautiful experiences. I think it was also especially poignant that it happened during Great Lent, and we could really spend a little bit more time in the services and praying and kind of sharing that together. We never drive to church together. We did every service together. It was quite extraordinary. So this has been an amazing experience for us, actually, and it's really helped plant some good seeds for our marriage, even though we've been married for a long time.
I think our motto in the Metropolis Family Wellness Ministry team is face to face, heart to heart, and I add pupil to pupil conversations. And I realize in the hustle and bustle of just normal life, we can pass each other by. And, my wife's really active and really brilliant lady. She's always doing creative things. So she's in her computer. And, sometimes, it's the attention that I think sometimes we all crave in all our relationships, because we're created for connection, sometimes gets lost in the hustle and bustle. So I think it kind of forces us to be in some kind of like a monastic setting, a little bit more quiet, a little bit more still. So those are a couple. There's so many things, and we can go on, but we're really blessed to have a pretty good marriage to begin with, and just to build on that, and to stop has been good for me, and I think for President. Yeah.
And I also think just not having to set an alarm every morning has been a huge blessing. Taking walks and noticing our neighbors and connecting and just seeing families and experiencing the way that our community is coming together has really been an extraordinary blessing as well.
Well, what would you think about some of these younger families where the children are at home now, they're being schooled at home, one or both parents is working out of the home, perhaps one or even both have lost jobs, and what kind of blessings in the midst of those kinds of challenges where structure to the day is something that's revered. For you, you're sort of saying this lack of structure has been a beautiful thing for you, given your stage and season of life. But how about in those situations where structure is so important to the functioning of the household? What would you have to say about the blessings that might come from this period of time?
I think for me, it goes back to, and it's hard. It's easy to say. Father St. Paisios says we can be like a honeybee or we can be like a fly, and it depends what you look for. Because I think in the families, the opportunities for complaining and having challenges are really opportunities to respond with God's grace. So I think the blessing can come even in the pain if we respond to the best of our abilities, knowing that God wants to meet us at that cross, at that place, at that time, in that moment. And I think a lot of times we get disconnected from our head and our heart, and we get upset, or we yell at our kids, or our kids just push us to our match, or our husband or wife, and we get disconnected like this. Then we respond from those old patterns that are not healthy. So I think the blessing can come, for me, from the people that I've worked with and seen, is how we can stop and really listen to how Jesus is trying to give us the power and the grace and the clarity to speak in the moment, if not in the moment, 5 minutes later or a bit later, to the challenge or to the response or the anger or to the blame or to the judgment or to the depression or to the fear. And that's where I think the blessing comes. And I think that's what our church is about. It's not a church that runs away and hides. I think a thing that I always share with everyone, what's not revealed cannot be healed. So a lot of times when we get scared, we react from those old patterns. And I'll just want one more thing. I think, we're created for connection. I think at the end of the day, our faith teaches us that. You look at all over the world, people need to be connected. And I think when we get scared, if we're going to lose that connection because our kids screaming or our husband or wife are not attending to us, or we're not being attended to, then what happens is we respond probably with not the best responses. But I think these are the opportunities where we really can say, I want to be connected to my kids. I want to be connected to my spouse. And that's the deep down desire. And when we feel we're not, or we feel like we're neglected, or we feel scared, then these old stories perk up and kind of bite us in our rear end and really hurt us.
And I also think that each of the stages of life that we go through as families and as married couples really offer the joys and the trials. And so, no doubt, a family with little kids who are demanding, who you're expected to be homeschooling, expected to do your full-time job from a computer, and you're in different places of the house. I mean, there's a lot of struggles that families are experiencing.
And we got to honor that.
And we have to
right?
honor
Not to
that.
pretend.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of husbands don't honor that. So if you guys, husbands out there.
Yeah, you know, and so there's so many different stages in that. And one of the things that we've just noticed around our neighborhood is that we sit in our backyard sometimes and we do our work on our computers. And yesterday I heard my neighbor James with his 8-year-old son jumping on the trampoline, and the squeals of joy coming from that house 2 doors down. And I kept on thinking to myself, you know, on a normal Wednesday morning, that would never happen. And this is an opportunity for connection. And we say that, you know, when you look for a house, what's the most important thing? You know, location, location, location. And here in families, we really try to continue to emphasize that it's connection, connection, connection. And we have this amazing opportunity with time to connect with our families, even as difficult as it may be. There's incredible joys that come with that. And my heart kind of aches most for teenagers whose lives are surrounded by their friends and they can't be with them. And that is really taking a toll on their world. But let me say that those parents who have not been able to gravitate to their teenagers are finding small little openings, be it having family dinners and asking questions and taking walks, being less on a schedule. And I think it's like alleviating the noise of our life.
At first it was really hard. I mean, I heard parents say, oh, what am I going to do? And that's what happens when fear comes in, or when we get challenged with a problem is we like I always say, we get disconnected, and then we can rebound and respond with grace. And the people that said, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do, I'm cooped up and I don't, you know, it's too hard. And now I'm hearing, wow, there's a nice rhythm, and wow, what's going to happen when this pandemic, things get back to whatever normal, the new normal might be, and what do I not want from my past, and to resurrect in a new way in the present and in the future. So I think with a parent, you know, President, I think that's a hard thing to be a mom and dad and to be needed so much. And I know that whoever's out there struggling, I think that the deepest part of your heart is you want to love your kids. I mean, and you guys are on the same team. And I know how the devil works. It comes in and divides and gets you to doubt that you should be a mother, gets you to doubt that you married the right person, gets you to doubt that your kids are okay. So my hope is we can find ways to respond to these challenges with, not on your own, with even friends and therapists, your priest, to include that, to create a safe place, to include those resources that love you, to support you, to listen to you, to see you, to be seen. I think that's what we strive for. And I think the depression that we feel and the anger we experience is all a response of a deep, deep place of wanting to be loved. I always tell people anger is a holy thing. And people say, what are you talking about?
If it's expressed in a holy way, right?
Wait a second.
Okay.
Anger is a good thing, because underneath the anger is a deep response to injustice or fear. And if we don't know how to respond to that with love, then it comes out in a burst, or it comes out with silence, it comes out with control, and it vomits out in rage. And if you're any of those guys, no, underneath is a deep love that you have, and a deep invitation by Jesus to say, I want to heal that, because how you're responding is really crazy. If I sent a movie of how you responded to your wife or your husband or your kids, a lot of us would be ashamed. But unless we can see the movie and say, how do I want to revise the movie? We're going to do the same movie for the rest of our life.
Again, going to what's not revealed cannot be healed.
And when you reveal it, how do we invite God to meet us there in the places where we don't like and that hurt us, whether we're depressed, whether we're fuming with anger, whether we're on this, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, there's such a powerful thing in this world that we're challenging science, we're challenging religion, we're not believing things that were rooted at one time. And for me, I am freaked out about our church, because at the rootedness of our church gives us a strength of love, gives us a strength to respond to all these things. So yeah. So
how do we sort of in our marriages step back and even recognize gosh, I just reacted to my wife, or I just reacted to my husband out of fear. I did not respond in love. Because most of us don't even realize, I don't think, when we are reacting to our spouses from a place of fear, because we often feel justified in our reactions when they come from a place of anger, and underneath that anger, a lot of hurt. So how do we even begin to recognize in our marriages that we may be really reacting out of fear?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is to get over the idea that you're adversaries. I think the devil wants to divide and conquer, and he ends up teaching us to fight his war, the devil's war, by getting me and her to be pushing each other, and we're on the same team. And I think when anger and violence and rage and depression comes in, it gets us to think that you're the enemies and we got to fight each other. And I think whoever is experiencing that, I want to tell you all, you're created in God's image, and how do we find the humility to know that you're beautiful? And if you were to show your video of what you just did, you'd be ashamed. And I think that's a good beginning to say not that you're not bad, but something needs to be healed.
But also recognizing that we get into this, what we call the infinity loop, where we continue to do things over and over again that are not helpful for our marriages, or who are not really actually addressing the real issue. And we end up, if you're angry, I will flight or fight. And a lot of times that happens in a marriage where you just lack all communication, you disconnect. And there is some amazing ways that we can actually, outside of that angry moment or outside of that fighting and frustrated, if we step back and go, looking back at this morning's conversation, that did not feel good to me. Can we talk about how we can work through this? Having a reasonable conversation, having reasonable communication outside of the conflict, and letting each other express really what's at the heart of the pain and the real pain can be a really big step. We've talked a lot about in our marriage about how we need to get out of that loop, and it is really hard to do. We've been working on this Created for Connection program where we talk about, you do a certain dance, and boy, sometimes our dance is not very beautiful and we're not in sync, and we need to find a way to step back, breathe, take 5 seconds, and really count down.
Let me tell you a story about a couple I saw a couple years ago, and one spouse was going through cancer, and the other spouse was a calculated person that wanted things organized. And what happened is every time they would go to the doctor, we'll call the spouse Mary would always be an advocate and always push and push and push and push, and kind of push the husband away, and he felt overruled and overtaken, and to make a long story short, they started hating each other, wanting to get divorced. And when we got underneath what they were really trying to say, what you saw on the movie screen was this. Underneath what she was trying to say is, I love you, and I want to be your advocate, and this is how I show it to you. And what he was trying to say is, I feel like I can't love you because you're building these walls by how you want to protect me, or how are you trying to help me? So, I think if we get underneath.
So how do couples do that in this period of pandemic when we're sheltered in place? Any thoughts about how we can take time to step back on a daily basis and look at some of these things? A strategy for that?
I think first of all, to realize you're on the same team. I think if this has been going, I don't know, whoever is listening, if this has been going on for a long time, it's probably been ingrained in you that it's not safe here. So maybe you can step back and say, wait a second, I got married to this woman or this man, and I really, the beauty of what God has brought us together, hopefully that's what brought you together, is real. And over time, this has happened, you just disconnected. And over time, you've been clouded by seeing life in very limited, if you put your hands like this, you only see it in a certain way, with fear and anxiety and hate and resentment. And I think the more you can step back and realize and open your open your eyes to see the beauty in your spouse, because it's hard to see the beauty. So I
But
think,
again, she's talking about how.
so I think
And
to step back,
Mhm.
to take a deep breath,
Mhm.
and realize you're on the team, on the same team, and to realize how you're going to take responsibility for your own stuff and really be committed to that. Otherwise, you're going to wait for your spouse to do it or your kids to do it. So I'm thinking, how can you take responsibility, not to judge yourself, but to realize this is an opportunity for healing, for growth, for beauty, and not to allow the pain just to be pain. But our church says pain is inevitable, but we go through pain with the power of Jesus Christ. And my thinking is, don't do it by yourself. It's hard.
But I also think this opportunity now, and I say this more so on a basis of you have planned times that you can actually address some of these issues that you really skirt most of the year.
Mhm.
And here you have, it can be really painful and it can be really beautiful. And so if you choose to actually say, let's think about what are the 3 things that we get into? What are our 3 infinity loops that we get into? Identify them. And then stop and step back and go, are we willing as a couple to really address what's behind the story? What's the story behind the story?
And I think addressing it is just sharing.
And it's sharing, but
without,
it's mainly listening with curiosity.
Yeah.
Listening to your spouse with curiosity and not having, what am I going to say next? How am I going to respond? How am I going to win? How am I going to be right? I think we have to pull back and go, how am I going to be in relationship with this person in really understanding that dance? And once you understand that dance, then when you get into that dance, you kind of can go, we're getting into that dance again. We're in that infinity loop, recognizing it at the time and going, okay, this doesn't feel good. I'm going to take a time out. I'm going to breathe. And I'm a big advocate of the 5-second countdown. You know, like I need to breathe and I need to say 5 seconds of like getting myself together before I lash out and respond. So many times we could just push our agenda and we need to just stop, allow space, and then allow the noise to stop in that.
And I think in those times we ask probably the most profound questions out of our frustrations. Like, why did you leave the toilet seat up or down? Why don't you take the garbage out? Why do you always interrupt me? The question, or what other questions come up in these difficult things? You know, you don't love me. Why don't you love me? And I was thinking the questions we ask are so important. And I think a lot of times when we ask questions, when we're frustrated, when blood pressure is high, we end up getting into a fight rather than writing these questions down and really in a prayerful, calm way, responding to the questions honestly, in a real way. Our church is a church of real.
Right.
So how do we respond to whatever question we have in a real way so we can listen and then we can respond?
One other thing, I took my shoe off so I can show my husband. I always say we need to be trying our best to just jump into the shoes of the other. And during this time of the pandemic, let's just think about what it's like for if I have a job and I'm working in the home and my husband has lost his job, and there might be underneath this extreme sadness, fear, anxiety, jealousy, all these different emotions.
Because every time I see her, she's the successful one.
Sure.
I lost my job, and then all my identity is maybe wrapped in my job, and I feel like I have to depend on her. That's not how it should be written.
It's really hard. Okay, so as the person who has the job and recognizes, okay, maybe my husband is feeling this way. He's expressing all this anxiety or frustration, but I don't really know what's at the bottom of this. And to have that conversation and to step back and reassure and love them.
I think when blame comes in, it just gets really messy. So we can do it honestly without blaming and just really being owning what our experience is and the feelings we have. So I think it's a difficult thing, President, because I think just offering that is loaded. It's like walking on a landmine, so we can do it carefully. I just saw this video they send me on Facebook, these little things about cats. And they had these dominoes set up all over the floor. I swear, I would think the dominoes would fall down, but the cat was walking and didn't knock one down. So it was very carefully walking. I'm thinking, how can we walk carefully so we don't knock each other down and we listen in a true way?
And then there's a beautiful question. It says, can you talk about the concept of dignity violation and how we can use this to communicate differently? And I think boy, if that is a beautiful way of saying dignity, like, how do I restore the dignity of my spouse? How do I respond?
Well, I think a violation when somebody violates my dignity, right?
Exactly.
Right.
But what she's saying is that there is this way in which we can really violate someone's dignity. And how are we going to communicate that we don't do that?
And can I say something to whoever wrote that? That's a beautiful, such a powerful response, because at the end of the day, listen, no one gets to define you but God. Remember that. And I think sometimes when spouses or friends or world or culture ends up polluting our soul, then we start doubting ourselves, then we start questioning ourselves. Then that's when this idea of gaslighting comes in, where we even judge our truth based on somebody's pushing on us their reality. So I think it's a very powerful thing. So one thing I would recommend whoever wrote that, and that's all of us, is know who you are, and you're God's beloved child and daughter or son, and that no one can take that, no one can define that for you. No one.
Let me ask a question. I'm backtracking just a little bit, but Rosita, Pat, I have heard you speak about gratitude and exercises, and where does gratitude fit into all of this marriage dynamic when things are really, really stressed? And maybe some ideas of, because if we do have a heart of gratitude to God for our spouse, it's a lot easier to reframe these difficult things as they come up with one another. So can you address that a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, I just finished going through 6 months of cancer treatment, and nothing puts your life face to face with trials and tribulations and the need for gratitude as when you're going through cancer, because you go through these extreme ups and downs. You're exhausted, you're tired, your body's filled with lots of things that you don't want it to be filled with, and through that experience, I feel that the blessing out of that has been to look at every breath with gratitude. Because when you're face to face with death, and when you're face to face with losing something that you care about deeply, you then become, you can't help but be filled with gratitude. And that happened in my marriage, and it happened with my children, and it happened with so many areas of my life, my work. I mean, I am a music teacher and I love to teach, but I never realized how much I love it more than anything when it was taken away from me. And so in reflecting upon how gratitude can completely change your attitude.
That's pretty good.
Isn't that true?
Gratitude, write that down.
Gratitude changes your attitude, but and there's certain things, like certain people are just naturally thankful. Naturally, that's my natural personality, to see
I used
the
to
good
hate that. She's so nice.
see the positive in things. But my daughter says to me, I'm writing on a gratitude journal. Three things every day that I am grateful for. And then she's asking her students to do the same thing. And I think that that's a really powerful tool to every morning wake up, or every night before to go to bed, consider what was my gratitude moment? Where am I thankful?
I think it's hard to, I think it's so hard to get locked into, if I lose my job, and to lock into that depression or to that being frustrated or hurt, and then see my wife or whoever, my spouse, working, and then instead of realizing that, thank God somebody's working, we're feeling sad or something, rather than having, oh my gosh, I get to be a part of this family where I can have support from a husband or a wife, and not get locked into judgment in all that.
I'm wondering about the possibility for something that couples could do on a daily basis, would be every evening before they go to bed, just to name one thing that they were grateful to God for regarding their spouse on that particular day. Because it forces us to find something good in the midst of struggle. And for some people right now, the struggle is so great that it really is hard to see the silver lining, the good, the grace of God, and the fruit that can be born. So maybe that's
I think the only way to do that too is, I was thinking a lot on this Holy Thursday, Prez and everyone, how, as a priest, you get privilege in so many ways. I got to carry the cross of Christ around and realize that the one who suspended the earth is suspended on the cross, and he loves me. And what I realize is the aloneness. I never thought about this ever in my life, that Jesus came into Jerusalem, everyone loved them, just like marriage. When we first started marriage, everything's great. And then slowly people are walking away to the point he's in the praetorium, he's naked, he's going to get thrown a cross on his back, and the people in the background are saying, crucify him, crucify him. And I realized at that moment, he's not alone. And that's the devil wants us to think we're alone, that Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is powerfully present there. And for us to know that we're not alone when we're going through depression, and to fight that, because that's where the devil kicks yours and my butt. He gets us to think that we're so isolated and alone. And then we work from that hurt place. And everything from that place, usually what is regurgitated is violence or depression or suffering or anxiety or fear.
And can you imagine what our lives would be like if we turn that story upside down and we were to say, I'm going to live my life with joy and gratitude and connection and possibility and discovery of like, what is it? Really,
so I think those are practical.
Well, but I think the reality for some marriages is that husband and wife do feel alone because they're lacking connection.
Yes.
And with all, and I'm addressing one of the questions right now with so much social media, we can sort of get lost on our computers, on our telephones, etc. And women's tendency is to have connection through face-to-face, person-to-person, heart-to-heart contact. Men can simply be sitting in the same room on their computer next to their wife and feel that they're connected, but that's where these differences are really being exacerbated right now. So help us. What do we do in these kind of instances where one person is really looking for more connection with his or her spouse?
I want to respond to that because I think when I was at the university, we'd always the literature says that women are more depressed than men. And I was thinking about that like 20 years ago, and I'm thinking, I think women have that because they know better enough to get help. So I think men are just as depressed and they're hiding. So I think for all us men, I think, how do we know how to get out of our computers and step into the life of our wives and our children so we can be seen and known? And we'll put on afterwards some questions that we can ask. I think it's hard, like if I'm stuck in a marriage where I'm not sure what to ask and I'm hurt, I'm not, if I say, how are you feeling, right? Fine.
Right.
Or what's going on? Nothing.
And this is when like you have the lack of vulnerability or the not willingness to share from the heart. I do have to say, one of the things that kind of connects us every single day, we play a card game called Chichoka. Father Evan Armatas gave us this game. Every single day,
we'll have a webinar on that.
Our café and we have our Chichoka game. And I'm not kidding. It's like our little connection. Like wherever we are in the house at 3 o'clock, we stop, we do our Chichoka game, and we have our conversation. Music can be playing, but no TV, no nothing else. And we just have this time together. It takes about 45 minutes, but we are committed to that. And I feel one of the things that this opportunity gives us is time for play. Time for play. Play games, do puzzles, do art, get creative, make a video. I mean, there's so many things that you can do as a family. Again, but it's so, so, so important to open up the floodgates of vulnerability to say, I'm willing to just spend time with you. And I'm going to go out of my comfort zone to maybe please you
real.
And to be honest about where we are. But sometimes it just takes opening that gate
if I'm a spouse that's been colder than ice or scared, or you might not think you're scared when you're engrossed in your work or your computer, I'm thinking, at the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed or when you talk to your kids, they're not going to remember that. They're going to remember the times you stopped and had face-to-face connection with them. So I think it's finding the humility to say, I want to be seen by you, and I want to see you, and I want to know you. So That's another topic for another day, because I think it's really complex. Because I think when somebody's hurt, you get so protected, and any simple, honest question can turn into a dynamite bomb blowing up by just simply saying, "Why did you say that?" Could be, "What do you mean? I thought you wanted me to be honest." Well, I don't want you to be that honest, you know.
Well, that addresses this one question: what do we say to those whose spouse is so far unwilling to be vulnerable enough to have these important conversations having to do with gratitude, infinity loops, etc.? What I'm hearing you say, Father Tom, is make yourself vulnerable to your spouse. I want to know.
As much as you can, yes.
I want to know your heart. I want to know your fears, your thoughts, your feelings, and in a sense, that's making yourself vulnerable to your spouse to want to get to know the other.
But that, I don't know, that's beautiful. But you better be ready to hear. Like if my wife asks how you doing when I became a priest, to be vulnerable on TV or whatever, you know, it was a scary thing for me. I didn't feel qualified. I didn't feel spiritual enough. I felt like this was the worst mistake I made in my life. I was, you know, driving to church hoping a tree would fall on my car so I wouldn't get ordained. It was a big thing because it's a huge thing. And for the first 3 months, man, things were coming out, like the fear and the inadequacy and whatever. And she was able to listen. Normally, yeah, so she was able to listen.
Don't let somebody just say.
Normally she has answers, but she was able to be still and listen. So I think, can we bear to hear our spouse talk about, "Oh my gosh, honey, I've been thinking about killing myself. Oh my gosh, I've been doing pornography. If you saw what I'm doing, oh my gosh. Oh my God." And then all of a sudden, all these secrets, right? What is not revealed cannot be healed. So you keep a separate world, and then you got to maintain that separate world by hiding. Holy, what a horrible life. Whoever's hearing this, if you have any friends, I'd love to talk to you about that, because that's a horrible life, and God wants us to be free from that. So I think you do as much as you can when you feel safe enough, right? Because I've known spouses who go that route to try to be vulnerable, and they get slammed. But try and see if there's an invitation. Try something simple, and not to talk about something very deep right away.
I wonder, is this the time to do it when there's so much stress on people's lives? Or is that something to consider later on when things lighten up a bit? I'm wondering, is this the opportunity, or is it really up to each couple?
I think that this is having those important conversations. Yeah. And, you know, the bottom line is everybody has a scale in which their marriage is either healthy or not healthy. And this really, we come face to face with the health of our marriage in these moments. And sometimes it might not be feeling safe, and you have to respect that. But I also think that it's an extraordinary opportunity to discover and to change and to say, I don't want to do the status quo. I mean, I think families all around the country are saying, we are way overscheduled. We need to rethink this. This has been amazing. I mean, I have friends of ours who run restaurants who are constantly busy and never spend time with their kids. And the only time they are spending time with their kids is to and from the soccer games.
I've never spent this much time as a
And it's like
common theme.
They're opening up their lives in beautiful ways. And I think we can do the same thing in a marriage, in that we can kind of start to address some of these heartfelt issues that we've been holding on to and not opening up for discussion. And wow, we can see things changing. Again, you know, there's opportunity there, but it can be.
Again, we're she's 1,000% optimist, but this is hard work.
It is hard work.
But it's worth it. It's life. This is what Jesus says for us. Deny yourself, not deny the bad things, deny the thing that keeps us stuck. Deny that so we can discover our true self and bring that forth and take our cross. For me means be real.
Be real.
Be real.
But what if you are in a situation where you have been vulnerable to your spouse, and then it's being used as a weapon in arguments, and you've gotten and you're in that kind of a place where you don't really feel safe being vulnerable or really asking for vulnerability from the other one?
Well,
what would you suggest in that kind of a
My
situation?
suggestion is you really find a way to stay grounded with God's grace and to see how you want to pursue, because then you can put yourself in a violent situation where you can continue to get hurt because you're a Christian and you're nice and you should be doing this. And the more you're doing this, the more punishment and more hurt is inflicted on you. And that's horrible. So I think my invitation to whoever's in that space is really find a friend or a priest or someone that can help you navigate through those landmines, because if somebody's not willing to have a conversation with you, really, I mean, you can't force it. So,
or the person is, but you're afraid that he or she will use it against you at some point. That's really a difficult place to be. So you just close yourself off.
Well, that's what I'm saying is you close yourself off, because that is never going to be a conversation when you're vulnerable. If somebody, I keep on saying, you know, this is a long story. I'm not going to say the story. Well, I'm going to say, sorry. It's going to take a long time. It's like 4 minutes. But, you know, the thing is, let's invite. Jesus wants to invite. He doesn't force conversation. So how do you invite? And if people take the invitation, great. If not, then don't be isolated yourself. Offer that story to somebody that can hold it with God's grace, so you can be supported in responding to that, you know, hard reality.
And, you know, we have to also remind all of us is that abuse of any kind, physical, emotional, spiritual, any of those kind of things that are happening in a marriage, if that is happening in your life, that is not okay.
Yeah. And during these times, you know, that's when the beauty and the difficulty gets challenged, you know.
So how do you begin conversations? I mean, couples who are really not used to opening their hearts to one another. What kind of, I will suggest something that has worked for us over the years.
Yeah, tell us.
And that is, at the end of the day, simply to ask my husband and he to ask me, what's been most life-giving to you today? What has filled you today? Or what was the best thing about your day? That kind of a question is open-ended, and it forces me to open up my heart, but in a really safe way if I feel like I don't want to be too vulnerable. And then by contrast, to also ask the question, then what really sucked the life out of you today? And then that gives us a really sort of safe space for having this conversation. I'm seeing as the questions are coming in, we're heading into some really basic things about marriage. Don't you pay attention to the questions? I'll do that. How do you learn to be a good listener? Somebody has said, you know, women tend to be a little bit better at this than men.
Wait a second. Who's saying that?
I'm sorry.
Who's saying that?
Actually, no, the question is they tend to listen differently. It wasn't better. I'm sorry. That was my own bias coming in. So how would you say couples can find space to really start listening to one another and hearing one another?
Let me tell you one thing somebody taught me. It's a question, Chinese proverb. If a tree falls, how's it go? If a tree falls in a forest and no one's there to hear it, is there sound? What would you say, Prez?
If nobody hears it, yes.
If there's a tree,
there is still sound
in the forest,
Absolutely.
and there's no one to hear it, is there sound?
There is still sound.
Okay, I don't know how many people here. Write your answer. Okay, we're gonna know. The answer is there's no sound.
Okay.
Because to have sound is you need to have a receiver to hear. Physically, you'll see the waves, but the waves has to receive something. And what I realize is a lot of times in our marriages and our relationships, as a therapist, as a priest, we don't know how to listen. So I think if you really make a true intentional wanting to hear your kids, hear yourself, hear God, hear your spouse, because it takes you to be attentive and present, not thinking of what I'm going to say the next question you ask, Prez, because I want to be smart, I want to look cool as a priest, and I want to be spiritual. No, to be present and feel safe that I can respond to that. So I think listening is really desiring to want to hear.
And, you know, I also have to say family dinner questions are
Yes.
really a wonderful opportunity for that, because
Yes.
you have kind of ground rules that you share the question and no one gets to talk except for the person who's going around and sharing. And there's something so beautiful about that you can just, even in the most mundane way, share what's going on in your heart, and there's no agenda to respond. And I'll post our questions here for you guys so you can have them.
And I would also like to recommend, for those who haven't seen this, and it has to do with this listening, a very brief video that I often show at marriage retreats, and it's called "It's Not About the Nail." You'll find it on YouTube.
Yes.
It's hilarious, but it really shows how men and women listen differently and how they tend to respond to one another differently. And that's a great conversation starter. It's only like 1 minute and 40 seconds. It's not about the nail. Another question that came in with I'm going to reword it a little bit, but as with each of us wearing so many hats, wife, husband, mother, father, uncle, aunt, employee, executive, plumber, all of these different things. How do we prioritize on a daily basis the most important relationship in our life, and that is our marriage, and that we recognize when Jesus gives that commandment that we are to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind? That is the primary relationship in our life, and to love our neighbor as ourself, that our closest neighbor day in and day out is my husband, or for the husbands is your wife. We might realize that in our heads, but we tend not to live it because of all of the responsibilities that we have.
What's the question again, Press?
How do we live out the reality that the most important human relationship in each of our lives, if we are married, is our spouse?
Well,
I just say, wake up, like in my mind, wake up, what's really important. We can get, again, the noise of the world and the noise of all of our responsibilities, everything else, it gets scattered. And I love that you pointed that out, Prez Carrie. It's like, what is the most important thing? There's this beautiful quote I have here. If we have a strong relationship with God, this will distinguish our relationships with others. We will be able to be the source of peace and tranquility and comfort always to them. Saint Anthony the Great. And when you really think about it, if you begin your day with prayer, if you begin your day solidly like comforted and connected with God, then it kind of helps you go, wow, well, who is my person? Who is the one that I need to minister the most to in this day? And most likely it is going to be your spouse.
Well,
he's going to say, maybe not.
Here's the deal. How am I going to love her if I don't know how to love myself?
Yeah, that's true.
Here's the deal. And how am I going to love myself if I don't invite God to help me love me so I can love her?
Right.
I think a lot of us have not really been well taught how to love. I mean, we go to auto mechanics, we go to law school, we go to med school. Who's gone to love school, right? And at the end of the day, what I've asked people, it's really a hard thing. And maybe I really feel this is where you got to start. And I ask people, go to the mirror and look in those beautiful eyes and tell that person, not platitudes, not pretending that you're the greatest person, to look in those eyes and say, I want to learn how to love you. I want to learn how to love you. And I want God to help us love each other, because I don't love you if I don't know how to love and be loved by God, and we're okay with each other. I think the most neglected relationship is ourselves. And once we have a true relationship, because we're creating God's image, then we can start morphing into that light and life. So I think it's really, I don't know, it's really taking the responsibility of what you learn about love. Let's revisit that, because there's probably good things there and things that are not okay. So I think it's really finding a way to look in the mirror and say, I really want to not pretend. And whoever wants to take this challenge, I want to see what it does to you. I had one guy, he couldn't do it. He couldn't look in the mirror. He freaked out because he never looked at his own eyes, really. Mm-hmm. You wash your face, you brush your teeth, you put makeup on, but to look in those eyes in the mirror with so much compassion I've had people cry because they've never looked in the eyes of their own eyes, asking that person in the mirror, I want to love you. And the power, and I want God to help us love each other so I could be there for my wife and my kids and my church and my community. And so there's so many ways, but
kind of face to face with yourself.
Face to face, heart to heart, you know, and really to desire that and really to want it. When we want things, you know, God, and we're really honest, God will grant it. I remember my son, he wanted a scooter. He was like 9 years old. No, you can't have a scooter. You know, the motorized dudes, right? No, you can't. Oh, come on, Dad. I got the money. You save money, like 120 bucks. No, it's too much money. It's stupid. So come on, Dad. He's relentless. And then one day, I don't know how he did it. He got like 100, I want a scooter, please.
All the reasons why he should have a scooter. And he posted it on top of our ceiling.
30 or 40
above our
pieces
bed.
of paper. I can't believe we're stupid enough we bought a scooter.
I know, but in that, there was such a lesson of like, if you really want something, you go all out, you know, and that's what the beauty of this opportunity is. If you really want to repair, if you really want to heal, if you want to
truly love,
it takes taking that step.
And one more thing too, I think, I know we're out of time, I'm sorry, I'm getting wound up right now. But I read this book, How to Have a Complaint-Free World in 30 Days. And in the book, it says how complaining is so important if we find ways to respond to the complaints. But he said this, it was a pastor who wrote it. It wasn't the best book, but the idea was really great. He said, can you imagine if you just stopped complaining? And he said, he took a challenge to not complain in 30 days. It took him like, I think, a year to have consecutive days where if he'd not complained for 10 days, and then the 11th day, he has to start from reboot and start from the beginning. It took him a year to just stop complaining. And I'm thinking, let's put the complaints in a jar so we can respond to them. Those are holy things. Complaints are important, like, you know, things that maybe that my wife does that hurts me. And those are important things, but we don't address them, they become fuel of blame and judgment. And then we end up hating each other and fighting each other, poking each other's eyes. And yeah.
All right, 2 more questions I really want to get to before we, I'm going back to St. Anthony that Presbytera Pat, you mentioned. He talks about a bow being stretched. He's talking about monastic life, and if you stretch that bow too hard for the monks, that it's gonna break, and we don't ever want anybody to get to the breaking point. For some right now, and before the pandemic, in their marriages, they were at the breaking point, and if they weren't then, they may be right now. What about those couples who are at the breaking point? What would you offer to them about navigating this time so they don't cross that line and get to that breaking point if they're close to it?
It's a really a big concern. It's a very real mental health challenge. And one, you're not alone and you need to reach out for help. And there are numerous really great therapists who are willing to actually be online with people, one-on-one, do Zoom and Skype calls. People feel like, okay, we can't go and seek out help because we're just trapped in our homes. That's not the case. There are opportunities to find help and resources. I also think that it's really important to realize that you're going to fall and you're going to have really difficult times, and you need to have courage to stand up once again when you fail. And there's another really beautiful quote by St. John Climacus that says, "Do not be surprised if you fall every day. Do not give up, but stand your ground courageously. And assuredly, the angel who guards you will honor your patience." Sometimes that patience is really important for the spouse to take on. Again, no abuse, not of any kind, is acceptable in a marriage. So we need to make really clear that that is not okay. But to reach out for help, to know that you're not alone, but also to have a spirit of forgiveness and compassion in your marriage, that you can kind of address some of those things with yourself.
I think that's true. And I think when you get to that point, it's almost like, you know, I keep on going, when you're disconnected like that, and it's hard to get your heart is so powerful and beautiful and connected with God. And when you've been beaten down by loss of job or being depressed or feeling anxious or overwhelmed by fear or being attacked by a spouse or kids, and in some ways it's not healthy for you, you kind of get locked into a prison. So I think what I've recommended to people, and it's really, really hard, is to remember. When you get disconnected, you dismember. And we have to remember. So our memories are powerful. And I think when we get to that point, the only memories that comes to mind is the memories of not being good enough, the memories of being stupid, the memories of being not a good wife or a good husband, the memories of, failure. And we gotta not play games, but look in our life and remember times that brought us life, times that we connected with God, times that we felt awake and alive.
And also even pulling out your old wedding albums.
And forcing yourself to do
that.
that.
Let's look at some of these things. Or let's think about one of the best vacations we've ever experienced and those times we felt connected. Those kind of questions
because the devil wants you to be in despair and feel like there's no hope.
Right.
There's no hope. Don't try. Don't bother. That's brainwashing by the evil one. I know how I get my growing up. Embarrassment was my big issue because I grew up in a family. My dad was a shoe shiner, and I was embarrassed. That was a big thing in my face until I realized the beauty of my family and who they really were. So I think the deception has to stop. And I think one way that can help you or me is to truly I cannot play games, but to go back and look at your photo albums and remember the beautiful times. You remember the times where you're able to breathe, the times where you're able to laugh, because the devil doesn't want you to do that.
Mm-hmm. So remember the past really good things, but also try each day to remember to see something good, even as distressed as things might be.
And I also think one of the kind of cool ideas when you look at the word wellness, it starts with the word we, wellness. And if you look at the word illness, it starts with the word I. So if everything is framed in the I, it will so often create this downslope of illness if we're only thinking about ourselves. And if we can look at the we, even in this whole idea of pandemic, we are in this together and we are making these really important decisions, not just as America, but as the world of how we're responding to this. And the we is so important in all this. And the we in our marriage is so important in this. And the we in our families are so important in this. So hold on to that.
I think that's a really good place to stop because we're way beyond. But
sorry about that.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I think what happened here was, as the questions were coming in, some very general questions about marriage and nurture of marriage came
That's
in,
so important.
which makes us realize we need to do some more webinars specifically on very particular topics regarding marriage. And even though we tried focusing a little bit more today about the added stressors, I think you offered a lot having to do with our marriages day to day, whether we are in our more normal circumstances or in a very, very difficult time. So thank you so much for what you've
You're
offered
so
today.
welcome.
So nice.
Really appreciate it.
And our Family Wellness Ministry is actually meeting this evening. We're going to have a real discussion about how to minister and connect with young married couples during this time. And so please connect with our website and our Facebook page, Family Wellness Ministry. And we're going to continue to try to serve and minister to people on a lot of levels to try to grow marriages.
And please remember, if anything today, remember you're God's beloved. And just try to remember that and consider that.
Oh, one other thing I've got to tell you. Chris Carey, you taught us
this is one thing for sure.
30-second hug.
Let's finish with that. Can we finish with that?
I'm not kidding. We use it all the time because we need physical connection. So
we'll show you this. We're great in examples here, real life situations. So when we first did that, my wife is just like sucked me in. But here's the deal. You just go really gently and just find the place where you're peaceful. You're not pushing each other. You find a way that you're balanced. I know it's sometimes hard for some people who have not touched. It's not sexual. It's not anything except 30 seconds. Don't talk. I'm talking, not explaining. And I know we're out of time, but 30 seconds. and do that 2-3 times a day. President Carrie and her beautiful husband shared that with us for 6 years, and it saved our marriage because I was like,
no, but it really is beautiful. So that's our last thing we want to leave you with is the Pres Carrie, Father Harry, 30-second hug.
30-second hug.
All right. See you all. God bless you.
So
Thank
much.
you. Christ is risen.
Truly he is risen. Amen.